As growth accelerated in the fourth quarter, the demand for innovative FPGAs powered by software that gives customers flexibility and agility continues to explode. With growth at over 30% in its Q4 and more new customers looking to Lattice Semiconductor across compute, industrial, and client applications, the future looks bright for Lattice Semiconductor. This week, CEO Jim Anderson joins the show. Here we go. You're tuned in to Making Markets.
This is the Making Markets podcast, brought to you by Futurum Research. We bring you top executives from the world's most exciting technology companies, bridging the gap between strategy, markets, innovation, and the companies featured on the show. The Making Markets podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Please do not take anything reflected in this show as investment advice. Now, your host, Principal Analyst and founding partner of Futurum Research, Daniel Newman.
Jim Anderson, CEO, Lattice Semiconductor. Welcome to Making Markets.
Thanks, Daniel. Great to be here. Good to spend time with you. Good to see you actually in person. I think the last time you and I talked, it was over Zoom. So it's nice to actually be sitting next to each other.
It is so great to be out and about, even if just a little bit.
I agree.
It's not normal yet, but I will be boarding a flight next week to Mobile World Congress.
Nice.
In Barcelona. And
Very
so these are the little items that start to feel like we're getting back to normal.
Totally agree.
Although having to take a test, wear a mask, show a vaccine passport, it's not all normal just yet.
But we're getting there.
We are getting here. And it is really great to be here in studio with you here at Lattice Semiconductor's corporate headquarters right in San Jose. It's a beautiful facility, nice studio, and glad to have you on the show.
Thanks, Daniel.
So let's start actually here at Lattice Semiconductor. I'm going to want to talk to you about your earnings, a little bit about your growth story, some of the places that you guys are playing. It's been an exciting couple of years. I've covered you guys in Market Watch as one of the up-and-coming semiconductor companies to watch because of the fact that you've had such strong growth. It was actually pretty remarkable heading into that last part of last year before a little bit of tech pullback, but still a great year overall.
Yeah.
But because Lattice Semiconductor is a growing entity, but not necessarily a household name just yet, give me and the audience just that quick sort of introduction of the company, how you present it.
Yeah, we may not be a household name, but in your daily life, you certainly use Lattice products in your daily life all the time, whether you're connecting to a data center server, sometimes client devices, all sorts of devices that we go into. So you're most likely using Lattice Silicon in some way. But as you know, where Lattice is focused, first of all, we're a semiconductor company. And the part of the market that we focus on is FPGAs. And the simple way to think about FPGAs is to think about them as really flexible, adaptable, reprogrammable silicon chips, right? And because they're really versatile and adaptable, they get designed into just all sorts of applications, especially in some of the kind of newer and evolving applications. And so Lattice is actually one of the companies that originally founded the programmable logic space. We've been around for now, actually we're approaching 40 years now. So we've been around for a long time. And specifically where we focus is in really power efficient, small size, very, very easy to use programmable logic and FPGAs. And so that's where we really focus our innovation. That's where our customers love about us. We've been doing that for many years, and that's really what's driving our growth right now, too. And so you would see us in all sorts of applications like data center servers, 5G wireless infrastructure, client computing, all sorts of different client computing devices, industrial automation, robotics, and automotive electronics, too.
So you're playing in all the spaces that people are really interested in.
Yeah.
I mean, the last year has brought just an immense amount of attention to the semiconductor space. We've had the challenges of the shortages in the supply chain. And I'm not going to hit you up about that just yet because I want to talk about your earnings. But semiconductors came into focus. It became a kitchen table conversation after so many years.
Yeah.
But now that everybody, between our phones, our gaming consoles, our TVs, our automobiles, all those places that you play, those are all the things that essentially we ran into all these issues with in terms of getting supply in. And so it ended up creating a massive boon across semis because if you listen to all the earnings calls, including yours, whenever these questions have come up, it's never, well, we don't have enough demand. That's not been the problem. It's everybody's basically saying, if I can get more wafers, if I can get more substrate, if I can get more process, if I can get whatever I need more, if I can get it, I have people that want to buy it.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty exciting. But speaking of having people that want to buy it, you had a really, really great result just yesterday. You posted your most recent quarterly earnings, gave full year, you gave some guidance ahead of what's going on. Talk to me about this quarter, because the numbers were really, really good.
Yeah, we're really proud of last year. We had, 26% growth year over year for full year. And then for Q4, we actually grew 32% year over year. So our growth was kind of accelerating throughout the year. And so we exited the year on a really strong trend as well. And we believe that the company has entered a new growth phase, a growth phase that we think will last for multiple years to come. And this is actually something, Daniel, that we talked about back in 2019. So when we laid out the new company strategy back in spring of 2019 at our Investor Day, we covered the product strategy, the market strategy, but the other thing that we talked about was the fact that we believed that the company would enter a new growth phase, a new accelerated growth phase in kind of the 2021-22 timeframe. So we're really proud to have kind of delivered on that promise, right? And we believe that 21 marked the shift, a new gear change for the company into this sort of accelerated growth rate. And what's driving that is really a couple things. First of all, we've totally rebuilt the product portfolio over the last few years, right? So, in fact, over the last couple of years, we've been launching new products at 3 times the rate of what we were, say, 4 or 5 years ago. So we've rebuilt the product portfolio. We've got a great roadmap in front of us. And then the customer engagement and momentum is just incredibly strong right now. I think it's the best it's ever been in the company's history. And so we've got great products, huge customer momentum, and we believe strong growth ahead of us. And so great growth in 21. And in fact, our profit actually grew at twice the rate of our revenue growth. And so, again, we're really excited about we feel we're at the start of a new, faster growth rate and growth trend for Lattice.
So, by the way, that probably is worth reiterating, that growth in margins, because for a lot of semiconductor companies, there's been a mix, but there's also been some margin under pressure, of course, because of the competitive nature of supply, demand, and competitive nature of all the materials has not been straightforward. So being able to manage your business and your margin to expand margin is noteworthy for sure. Yeah. Investors probably are very, very pleased to see that. You mentioned a whole bunch of categories, Jim. You mentioned, automotive, and you mentioned servers, and you mentioned IoT and edge. So you got this really strong growth, 26% quarter, 32%, I believe, was the year. Do you have any of these segments, areas that you're finding are more driving this growth, or is it kind of across the board?
Well, so one of the great things about FPGAs, the type of chips that we develop, is they're very flexible and adaptable, which means that they go into all sorts of applications. So we can participate in a lot of the kind of big secular growth trends that the industry is seeing overall. So, but just to give you a few examples of kind of where we're seeing really strong growth, one that we've seen is servers for data centers, right? So obviously across the industry, there's been a tremendous build out in data center servers for hyperscale data centers, cloud data centers over the years. And we expect that to continue for the industry. But within servers, Lattice, we've really been growing our position within servers. We've been increasing with each generation what we call our dollars of content per server. Our attach rates have been going up. We're now at an over 1x attach rate, which means on average, we ship more than one piece of Lattice silicon for every server that ships. ASPs have been going up. So we've been growing our position within a growing market. So servers is one. 5G wireless infrastructure. We're still, if you look globally, we're still in the early stages of 5G wireless build out. Yep. And we have a great position in 5G. We have over 30% more content in a 5G base station than we do in a 4G. And so as 5G continues to be built out, we see great growth there.
What drove that? Just curious. Why?
Yeah, so partly it's the better product portfolio that we brought to the market. So as we improve our product portfolio, we're able to gain better position on those systems. And so 5G will be a great growth driver for us moving forward. We saw great growth in 2021. Another example is industrial automation and robotics. So the experience of the pandemic, I think for a lot of companies really catalyze them to accelerate their move towards automation and robotics. So if you're a manufacturing company or involved in some sort of production, you may have had shortages in terms of workers. You may have difficulty recruiting or retaining workers. And so that's driving you, that's catalyzing you to accelerate automation and robotics. We're seeing that across the board. Lattice devices are a great fit for automation and robotics. We're designed into all sorts of automation robotics systems. And so we've seen really strong growth there. And then last area I'd point out, which is kind of a greenfield growth opportunity for us, is client computing. That, if you look at the size of client devices, PCs, things like that, it's well over 300 million units, or system units that ship every year. That's a big TAM for us. And so we've been bringing in some really pretty exciting new user features and capabilities to the client computing market. Actually, we just had an announcement with Lenovo on their ThinkPad product line, where Lattice, some of our newest devices and software are going to be integrated into Lenovo ThinkPads and bring some really new, cool user experiences to the market. So that's just another example. So yeah, a lot of different growth areas for us right now.
Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint one because to some extent, everyone wants to know where's the ascent, or where 5G. They want to know, where do I invest in 5G, or hey, and of course, to your point, the PC, the death of the PC has been largely overestimated, right?
Definitely.
And we've seen how essential the PC has become throughout the pandemic.
Definitely.
And then, of course, there's different formats, and I'm sure you guys will have capabilities to move up and down with bigger and larger format and smaller format mobile devices. Yep. And actually, something that came to mind as you were talking is you're mentioning a lot of these areas that you're in. And I think sometimes people can become a little bit confused because they're like, oh, so you're competing in 5G, so you're competing with Qualcomm, or you're competing, and you're not. One of the things that makes the Lattice story so exciting or interesting is that you guys work in parallel with so many of these sort of known silicon makers.
Absolutely.
And you're part of the BOM.
Yeah.
And when people think of it, they might think of the general purpose CPU as the silicon in a product, but there's lots of silicon. In cars, there might be hundreds of pieces. And the point is that you're attaching in a very strategic way, and you're getting this 1x plus per server ship, for instance, not because you're trying to necessarily go after general purpose CPUs, but you're saying we're working in parallel. We're developing, give a little bit more about that, like how you guys kind of coexist, because I think that's an interesting thing that people don't always understand.
Yeah, so we partner with a lot of companies across the ecosystem. So you mentioned Qualcomm. Qualcomm's a partner of ours. So we build reference systems together where Qualcomm silicon and ours are working together to provide a great user experience. We'll also work with AMD CPUs, Intel CPUs, and we'll partner to make sure that their chips and ours, first of all, work great together, but they bring an even better experience or new capabilities or features to the customer.
Yeah, and it got me thinking, because some of the security technologies that you guys have developed, I know I've talked with some of your executive team in the past on some different podcasts, and we've even talked about some of the misconceptions of FPGAs. But listening to some of the security technology used for the boot on a server to make sure that where an FPGA can play a really important role for safe booting of a server. I mean, just simple things. Or in the client space, some of the stuff you're doing with AI.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that, because I thought it was really interesting. Right now we've got so much data, protecting people's data, privacy, and you guys are putting kind of what I would say is imperative technology into client that can be used to make PCs safer.
Yeah. So, in fact, we have FPGAs that include specific security technology that help protect the hardware platform. So, for instance, you mentioned client servers. If you take a server, for example, one of the things you want to make sure is that the hardware itself, including the firmware, has not been corrupted in any way from a security perspective. It used to be that people were really just focused on security more at the higher level software layers, but now people want to make sure that the entire system is secure all the way from the software to the fundamental hardware and firmware underneath. And so you can use Lattice devices, some of our secure FPGAs, to ensure that right when the system boots up, that the hardware and the firmware have not been corrupted. So for instance, the Lattice device will go out and check the firmware and make sure that the correct firmware is on the system. And actually, it keeps a golden copy of the firmware inside the Lattice device. And if it does detect a bad piece of firmware, it can actually repair that. And so making sure that the platform right from the very beginning of when it boots up is secure is one of the things that we can bring to servers. And we're seeing designed in across multiple servers. That same technology is applicable to client devices as well. I mean, if you want your servers to be secure, but definitely your client devices as well, because they're out there in the wild, right? So yeah, it's a great new technology and capability that we've been bringing to the market.
And a sort of a simple way to get under the hood there is you're going to be able to repair it before the vulnerability could potentially get to some of those more sensitive software.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Because when I first heard about it, I'm like, that's really smart. It's a pretty straightforward and simple layer to the design. Yep. That you really do some risk mitigation. And with what happened over the last few years with some of the vulnerabilities in general purpose silicon, we don't need to rehash that again. But having those additional layers of security and catching it earlier can be really, really meaningful to companies and
absolutely
to, of course, this whole industry.
Definitely.
But so let's bounce towards one of my favorite topics that I like to ask, especially when I bring on companies that, as I suggested, maybe not everybody fully understands the business. You are growing so fast. You are attached to so many of these key partners in the industry. Trends like 5G, automotive, automation, which, by the way, that deserves its own conversation. Yeah. Who would have thought silicon and human capital would have such a tie together? But right now, when companies can barely find people to work, being able to automate steps in your business processes is becoming exponentially more important.
Definitely true.
But when you're out talking to people, whether it's at the Thanksgiving table, whether it's a small group of maybe people in tech, but that don't necessarily know, like what do you feel sometimes about Lattice isn't being fully appreciated in the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, let me think in terms of both customers and investors, right? If I think about customers, I would say, we're getting a lot of love and appreciation from customers. So I'm actually not too worried about customers, because customers, they definitely see that we have our strongest product portfolio we've ever had in the company's history. They see the roadmap in front of us. They see not just the hardware devices we've been building, but the software we've been building on top of that. So when I look at the customer engagement and momentum, it's off the charts. And so I'm not worried about customers. I think we're getting plenty of appreciation from them. But if I talk about investors, I do think there's part of the Lattice story that's underappreciated still by our investors. And I'll contrast it, and I think it's software. It's about our software strategy. And I'll contrast it with our hardware strategy. So I think the hardware, the devices that we build, I think that's really well understood by our investors, because they've seen over the last couple of years, as I mentioned earlier, we've tripled our rate of new products that we're bringing to the market versus a few years ago. We've rebuilt the hardware product portfolio. We've got a great roadmap in front of us. We've got a new platform we're launching second half of this year. So I think that's really well understood, the hardware part of the story. I think the part that's underappreciated is the software strategy we've had in place. So over the last few years, we made significant investments in software to make it really easy for customers to design Lattice chips into their devices, or to switch from a competitor's device over to our device. And specifically what we've been investing in is these kind of application-specific solution stacks. And we brought 4 of them to market to date. We've got more on the way. But they're basically pre-built software tools and libraries that make it really easy for those customers to use our devices. And then the benefit for the customer is that they can get to market much quicker. The benefit for us is that accelerates our time to revenue, right? So we can get customers into revenue for us much faster, and it also creates stickiness over the long term. So I think that software strategy is kind of understood, but I still feel like it's a little underappreciated, the power of the software that we're building and the power to accelerate revenue over the long term. And
I was just thinking it actually, to me, if you look at some of the companies that have seen their multiples grow the fastest, especially in semis, though, it's the companies that are increasingly becoming software first organizations, and in the silicon, the hardware, the manufacturing is sort of, it's a supporting cast of the business. And I can think of one big AI company, for instance, that, if you actually talk to some of their engineers, they will say, we're not a chip company, we're a software company. And to the extent is people are looking for companies like yours, Jim, to come to them and say, here is the solution. Here is the stack. Here's the, not just the hardware. Here's the hardware, the software, here's the framework. Here's deploy it. Here's how you scale it. We'll be your partner. We'll be side by side to build this thing up. And as tech evolves, Lattice is going to be here for you. I know. Yeah. And that's kind of how you're seeing things. Like I said, you see some silicon companies in the low double-digit multiples. You're seeing some reaching 40, and in their peaks, it was 70, 80, 90. Yeah. And it's not because of the huge margins in hardware or the expense of setting up new fabs and process. It's the software. It's the software and scale.
Absolutely. Software is at the heart of our strategy. And it's not to say we don't invest in the chips. You got to have the chips too. But we are absolutely investing in the software, and not just organically. We've been investing organically, but inorganically too. We just did an acquisition last quarter. We acquired a company called Mirametrix, which is brings artificial intelligence technology in general, but specifically Mirametrix are software experts in computer vision. And computer vision has, I know you know this, Daniel, that it has applications across multiple different markets, client computing, all sorts of industrial applications, automotive electronics. And so we think this is just a great addition to Lattice. They're deployed, Mirametrix is deployed on already over 20 million end user systems. And so they bring a great capability into Lattice. But to your point about solution, that allows Lattice to bring a full solution all the way from the hardware layer up to the application layer. And so we're able to bring a really complete solution to our customers, which is a tremendous help to them and really benefits us in terms of long-term stickiness.
Which, by the way, I loved the solution. I believe it was tied to Mirametrix, but the whole ability like on client to be able to sense presence. Yeah. And to be able to know, because that's one of the biggest vulnerabilities. People don't realize, like visual hacking and stuff like that, though, is, you're sitting on an airplane. I mean, I don't mean to, but sometimes I'm reading people's emails because, I mean, you've got your big open laptop and you've got sensitive, confidential, I've seen people do an M&A. You're sitting on an airplane and what I'm saying is like someone gets up and goes to the bathroom, and we're doing it on accident, but if someone is on purpose, in a coffee shop. So just these opportunities, just building technology to remove that opportunity. I know you're not there. Like the machine, I know you're not there. I'm going to shut down, and I'm not going to make this data available again until I see that you have returned. And
so one of the applications you're talking about is the Mirametrix and Lattice Silicon. What it can do is detect if somebody's sneaking up behind you and looking over your shoulder. And what it can do is throw a warning sign up and let you know that, hey, somebody's trying to visually hack your system, right? So absolutely. And there's a bunch of other cool use cases for it as well. But the computer vision.
I just remembered that one because with the vision, that's a really very real world application. Definitely. How vision can be, of course, in vehicles for paying attention, things like that. I mean, gosh, I know our cars are all going to drive themselves, but they're not yet. So maybe we could have some technology that could, I've always said that, like, how does a car not really know yet that you were multitasking? Like, how does it not know you were on it does, but it doesn't. And it's kind of like, societally speaking, we need intelligent software and silicon that actually enables us to measure, manage, and keep track of this stuff, but do it in a way that's not too invasive. And, so we got to balance human privacy and rights with what technology is capable of.
Absolutely.
I know we got to wrap up here. So I want to end this with a sort of a forward-looking question. You've got this great growth. You're seemingly accelerating, to keep the automotive puns going forward here. Where does that next wave of growth come from for Lattice Semiconductor?
Well, I think it's really coming from the places that we've already been growing. So, our big growth areas are communications, computing, industrial, and automotive. And it's a lot of those places that we've been growing over the last couple of years, right? So, for instance, in the communications and computing segment, that segment grew over 30% last year for us, right? And where we're seeing growth is 5G wireless infrastructure build-outs, servers. We believe we're continuing to grow our position in servers. Like I mentioned before, client computing, which we talked a little bit about today, we're at the very early stages of fully tapping into that growth opportunity for us. And industrial automation and robotics, we talked a little bit about that. We're really well positioned there. And then automotive electronics, that was a great growth area for us last year. We've got a very full design win pipeline in front of us. And so I think auto electronics is another place, ADAS, infotainment systems, where you'll see Lattice grow. And so, across those multiple different growth areas, we feel pretty good. And, we're also going through new product cycles. We're ramping up new products. Our latest platform that we launched is Nexus. And last year was just the first year of a full year of revenue from Nexus. We have years ahead of us of that platform fully ramping into full peak production. We've got a new platform called Lattice Avant that's coming at the end of this year that actually brings 5 times more capacity and capability to our customers and doubles our addressable market. So that will launch second half of this year, and that'll create a new revenue stream for us further out in time. And so, yeah, we got a lot of, both from a product perspective and from a customer market perspective, a lot of growth engines underneath us. So we're pretty excited about this kind of new phase of growth we've entered in 21 and the future moving forward.
Well, as you head into a new year, I want to congratulate you on the results last year. It was great results. Yeah. I want to thank you so much for joining me here on Making Markets. Jim Anderson, we'll have to have you back soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Making Markets. Enjoy what you heard? Please subscribe to get every episode on your favorite podcast platform. You can also watch us on the web at futurumresearch.com/makingmarkets. Until next time, this is Making Markets, your essential show for market news, analysis, and commentary on today's most innovative tech companies.